Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is a 1966 American drama film directed by Mike Nichols in his directorial debut. The screenplay is by Ernest Lehman and it is an adaptation of Edward Albee's 1962 play of the same name. It stars Elizabeth Taylor as Martha, Richard Burton as George Segal as Nick, and Sandy Dennis as Honey. The film depicts a late-night gathering at a home of George, a college history professor, and his wife Martha, the daughter of the university's president. The guests are Nick, a new biology professor at the school, and his wife Honey. The film was nominated for 13 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for Mike Nichols. It is one of only 2 films to be nominated for every eligible category at the Academy Awards, the other being Cimarron. All 4 main actors were nominated in their respective acting categories, the first time the film's entire credited cast was nominated. The film won 5 Oscars, including a second Academy Award for Best Actress for Taylor and Best Supporting Actress for Dennis. In 2013, the film was selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the United States National Film Registry as culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. Edward Albee's play in 1962 was replete with dialogue that violated standard moral guidelines for movies at the time, including multiple instances of "goddamn son of a bitch" along with "screw you, up yours, monkey nipples," and "hump the hostesses." It opened on Broadway during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the audiences who had gone to the theatre to forget the threat of nuclear war were shocked by the provocative language and situations they had not seen before outside of experimental theatre. The immediate reaction of the theatre audiences, eventually voiced by critics, was that Albee had created a play that would be a great success on Broadway, but could never be filmed in its current form. Neither the audience nor critics understood how much Hollywood landscape was changing in the 1960s, and that it could no longer live with the meaningful production code. In bringing the play to screen, Ernest Lehman decided that he would not change the dialogue that had shocked veteran theatregoers in New York only 4 years earlier. Despite serious opposition to the decision, Lehman prevailed. The choice of Elizabeth Taylor at the time was regarded as one of the most beautiful women in the world to play the frumpy, 50-ish Martha surprised many, but the actress gained 13.5 kgs for the role, and her performance alongside those of Richard Burton, George Segal, and Sandy Dennis was ultimately praised. When Warner Brothers head Jack L. Warner approached Albee about buying the film rights for the play, he told Albee that he wanted to cast Bette Davis and James Manson in the roles of Martha and George. In the script, Martha references Davis and quotes her famous "what a dump" line from the film Beyond the Forest in 1949. Albee was delighted by the cast, believing that James Manson seemed absolutely right, and watching Bette Davis do that Bette Davis imitation in the first scene, that would have been so wonderful. However, fearing the talky, character-driven story would land with a resounding thud and that audiences would grow weary of watching 2 hours of screaming between a harridan and a wimp, Nicholas and Lehman cast Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton instead. Edward Albee was surprised by the casting decision, but later stated that Taylor was quite good and Burton was incredible. In the film, though, he still felt that Mason and Davies would have been less flashy and ultimately created a deeper film. The film adaptation differs slightly from the play, which only has 4 characters. The minor characters are the roadhouse owner, who only has a few lines of dialogue, and his wife, who serves trays of drinks and leaves silently, were played by the film's gaffer, Frank Flanagan, and his wife, Agnes. The play is set entirely in Martha and George's house. In the film, one scene takes place at a roadhouse, one in George and Martha's yard, and one in their car. Despite these minor deviations, however, the film is extremely faithful to the play. The filmmakers used the original play as the screenplay. Aside from toning down some of the profanity slightly, like Martha saying "screw you," which becomes "goddamn you," virtually all of the original dialogue remains intact, although a major monologue by Martha is cut. Now, the title of the film and the play, of course, alludes to the English novelist Virginia Woolf, who is also referenced in the song "Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf" from Walt Disney's animated version of Three Little Pigs. Because the rights to the Disney song were expensive, most stage versions and the film have Martha sing to the tune "Here We Go Around the Mulberry Bush," a melody that fits the meter fairly well and is in the public domain. In the first few moments of the play, it is revealed that someone sang the song earlier in the evening at a party, and although who first sang the song, Martha or some anonymous party guest, remains unclear. Martha repeatedly needles George over whether he found it funny or not. Albee described the inspiration for the title as he said, "I was sitting in a saloon in New York having a beer one night and I saw 'Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf' scrawled on the soap. When I started to write the play, it cropped up in my mind again. And of course, 'Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf' means who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Who's afraid of living life without false illusions? And it did strike me as being a rather typical university intellectual joke." In a later interview, Albee would say that the characters of Martha and George were based on 2 of his friends, the married New York socialites Willard Mass and Mary Mencken. Mass was a professor of literature at Wagner College, and Mencken was an experimental filmmaker and painter. Mass and Mencken were known for their infamous saloons, where drinking would commence at 4 p.m. on a Friday and end in the wee hours on Monday. The primary conflict between George and Martha in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is derived from Mass and Mencken's tempestuous and volatile relationship. Now, I went to go and watch a theatre production of the show the other day, and I was frankly blown away here by Edward Albee's phenomenal script, which, even though it was written in 1962, is still as relevant and biting as it was back then. The show just doesn't date in any way, as you see this back and forth now between these four fantastically written characters. And the show's themes are ever present and completely relevant to today's society. For example, the theme of reality versus illusion, as all the characters here create illusions to help them evade feelings of their own inadequacies. For example, George and Martha evaded the ugliness of their marriage by taking refuge in illusion, and the play demonstrates how its characters must rid themselves of falsehood and return to the world in which they must live. And the distinction between truth and illusion is at times left deliberately unclear and ambiguous within the story. The existence of a child, the murder of George and his parents, or Honey's pregnancy may be illusions, but they still have some reality to the characters. Or even how the story deals with the critique of societal expectations. For me, the story opposes the idea of the perfect family, and it almost attacks the false optimism and confidence of society's expected norms of what a family should be. George and Martha are the older, cynical married couple who have been together for so long that their relationship has evolved into a verbal jousting back and forth. For me, they epitomize the couple that still loves each other but just can't stand to be around each other. And they test each other's wits and push the boundaries to see just how far the other one will go. On the other side of the coin, we have the younger couple here, Nick, whose name is actually never mentioned within the script at all, and his wife Honey, who are young and naive, yet as the show plays out, you learn their relationship isn't quite as it seems. The show starts at 2 a.m. in the morning as the drink begins to flow, and all the characters lose their inhibitions as the truth or lies are fully revealed. Now, the movie is made in 1966 and is completely faithful to the play, almost verbatim, with the exception of a few scene changes, as movies, of course, have the freedom to use. But the core essence of the play remains in what plays out as a classic and doesn't date a day, especially when the outstanding performances here from all the lead cast and the outstanding direction here by Mike Nichols in his feature film debut. This is an instant film classic and deserves the highest credit for making the movie without compromise. Taylor reaches the fullest of her powers here as Martha, and her performance is layered, poignant, and quite powerful, as she really brings Martha to life perfectly. Richard Burton here is outstanding as the cynical George and has some of the best lines in the show, delivered with cutthroat ease by an actor of Burton's class. George Segal is also superb here as Nick, the cocksure, young, confident teacher, hoping to win sway and gain influence by winning over the boss's daughter. Sandy Denise also plays her role perfectly here as the innocent, naive Honey who cannot handle her alcohol and is almost childlike, especially around these more jaded and cynical characters, all who have different intentions and hidden meanings behind their stories. The show is long and the dialogue is very heavy and intense, and you have to listen very closely. And that's one thing I enjoyed about watching the stage version, as you really did welcome the two interval periods within the 3-hour play. Of course, using the pause button on the movie never went amiss, and in order to give the script its full attention it deserves, you almost need that little break just to have a breather. But in saying that though, it is wonderful to see actors at the top of their game, delivering on a phenomenal script, delving into the multi-layered characters of whom they are playing, and you can just see they really are enjoying doing this work. I'm happy to say that this film delivers in every way that the play does, and it's a fantastic way to see Edward Albee's work at its best. Fantastically acted, beautifully directed, and well worth a watch, particularly to any lover of proper cinema. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf gets a 9 out of 10.